Okay, webinar's now live. Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome. Let me share my screen here. Whoops, that's my desktop. Hey, everyone. Please introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to learn your name, where you're joining from today, and what is your biggest challenge related to pricing. We'll give folks just a couple minutes to join.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic and grateful that you all asked me to talk about it because, to be completely frank, this is probably the number one question I get from people is, I don't know, what should I charge? What should I charge for this? What should I charge in general? How do I figure out what to charge? It is something that really can make us stuck because it's like one of those decisions that we have to make before we can move forward. Let's say, for example, you're teaching a workshop and you want to get people to sign up. Until you know what to charge, you can't take any names. You can't
It's an essential thing. Yeah, you can't have a business without it. So Christine and Bernadette have messaged Mado and I in panelists, introducing themselves. So hello, everyone. Don't forget, when you're sending a chat message, switch the to drop-down menu to be to panelists and attendees. Then everyone will be able to see who you are and get to know you. So yeah, let us know
Perfect.
what challenges you've had related to pricing. Yep, Christine, you got it.
Exactly. Yeah. And let us know too if there's something specific that you're trying to price. Like, is it your private sessions? Is it your weekly classes? Is it a workshop? What are you working on right now where pricing is important for you? Like, maybe you have your weekly classes set up and you feel comfortable pricing those, but now you're trying to figure out how to price your private sessions. That would be helpful too for me to be able to customize some of the content just for who you are. And you could also tell us how long you've been teaching yoga. That's always helpful for me to know as well.
We'll just give everyone maybe one more minute to roll in. So please say hello. Thank you so much for coming today, for joining us live. I'll watch a live webinar, but I'm going to be honest, recordings, they're tough for me to get to. So if you are watching this recorded, kudos to you for carving out this time. And thanks to everyone who came live. Hi, Natalie, messaging us and panelists. Okay, Christine. Oh, switch to 8-week terms. Oh.
But I still offer the drop-in option in case somebody wants to try it out. I should probably drop the 10-pack option now to encourage 8-week signups. Yes, I definitely agree with you that if you're doing a term, that you want to encourage regular attendance, not just for yourself, but really for the benefit of your students. So if you're offering terms, you can make the decision to allow drop-ins, maybe even limit the number of drop-ins. Like, you can drop in like one time to check it out, but then after that, you need to sign up for the term. And, here's the place that we always get stuck is this fear of not having enough, where we're like, well, what if there's somebody who would have come to 3? I limited them to 1, but they're not willing to come to all 8. And that's a personalized choice, right? As much as I wish I could give you like magic formulas today, I'm going to provide you with information and frameworks to help you make your own decisions. So you got to make your decisions based on your values. And ultimately, one way of thinking about this, like a term and a series, is that the value is creating a container for your students that is going to support their growth. And so if having the same students with a more committed practice is a value, over time, you may end up making more money that way because the students who do come are going to get more benefit from being there. On the other hand, if your value is more around flexibility and offering a lot of options, then you might choose to keep all of them. So those are just some of the ways that we want to think about it. And I'll come back to this concept of values again and again today as I go through my content.
With that, I see all of your great responses in the chat. So thank you everybody for sharing and just being open and ready to learn. As Mado is reading those, and I know she'll address them in her presentation, I'll kick it off with an introduction to welcome everybody. So my name is Camille, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the partnership coordinator at Offering Tree. So if you're not familiar with Offering Tree, we're an all-in-one and easy to use business platform for you to set up your website, classes, courses, and memberships all in one place with one login. So if you think of your business as a house, we're like the electricity that keeps the lights on. And just like if you're a homeowner, you know that if you have to see those electrical wires, if you have to go in and mess with those electrical wires, it is not a good time. It is stressful. So Offering Tree is here to give you the tools and peace of mind so you can grow your business with your values on your terms and not have to stress about technology and the wires that hold everything together. We're also founded by wellness providers for wellness providers. So our co-founders have been right where you are, struggling with pricing, trying to figure out what offerings are going to be the most resonant with their audience, and also having to constantly learn all of these new technology and marketing techniques. So it's a big, important part of our mission to share resources like Facebook groups, articles, and these monthly webinars with our community of experts like Mado. So, speaking of confidence, pricing is one of those things that any business owner across any sector is probably had to go through some learning curves with. So I know even myself personally as a freelancer, this has been a struggle of mine to get my pricing right. So I'm really, really excited that Mado is here to lead the session. So before I pass it off to Mado, I just wanted to let you know a couple housekeeping things. Please send all your questions in the chat. I will be watching it, so will Mado, and there'll be opportunities for Q&A. Once I pass the mic to Mado, I will go off camera and mute myself, but I'll still be here in the chat hanging out with you all. If you have any questions, you can message me individually or in the chat. And that's it. So without further ado, Mado, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Camille. I have a quick question for you, actually. So I see that there's a Q&A feature in Zoom. Mm-hmm. Should people still ask their questions in the chat instead of using the Q&A feature?
I'll pose it back to you. What's easiest for you as the expert to track?
Well, I like having it in the Q&A section because then the questions are separated from the general comments and the hellos, which I love seeing. And I love encouraging people to participate in the chat. But then sometimes I won't have time to catch every question as they come through. For example, I would love, Camille, if you could make a note of this question about teaching family and friends, because charging family and friends, several people have it. I think that's going to be best saved for the end, because I think you're going to have more context for my answer after I've shared the material that I have prepared for today.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah, I got it. So folks, specific questions, go in the Q&A box. Chatting with us and sharing your responses, go into the chat, and I'll be watching both. Okay?
Perfect. Thanks so much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Let me know in the chat if you can see this, see my screen, see my slides. This is just the very first cover slide. And before we jump into, I'll share a little bit about myself. I'll share what I'm going to talk about today, but I want to just make sure that you know that you're in the right place. Who I created this presentation for. I work primarily with yoga teachers. I've had definitely some other wellness providers reach out to me and I have worked with some Ayurvedic providers, some massage therapists, but primarily I work with yoga teachers. So that is going to be the context for this presentation. And you can definitely extrapolate if you happen to not be a yoga teacher. So this presentation is for people who feel committed to making their offerings accessible financially, but also need to make an income from their teaching. So basically, this is not necessarily for those of you who are like, I teach as a hobby, and as long as I break even, I'm fine. Pricing doesn't really matter so much for you. You can just price it at whatever you want. I also created this presentation, this training for you if you have a tendency to freeze when the topic of pricing comes up, or if you start to stutter or stammer or feel like you go beet red and you just don't know what to say. This training is definitely for you. And also it's for you if you have a tendency to agonize or get stuck when it comes to pricing. If it stops you in your tracks and prevents you from taking action that you know you need to take in order to grow your business, in order to make the impact that you want to make in the world. So I'd love to hear, do any of these three scenarios resonate with you? Tell me in the chat. Have one, two, or all three of these things happen to you? Or do you identify with one, two, or all three of these? And you can just share with me so that I know primarily what people are here for and what they need. By the end of this workshop, my promise is that you'll understand the most common pricing and money mistakes that waste your time, confuse your students, and prevent you from creating fair and sustainable financial policies for your business. So when we are making a living doing what we love, there's a bit of conflict there, or potentially there's some synergy there. The conflict is that we feel like we want to help as many people as we can. And the conflict is that we also need to pay our bills. We need our business to be sustainable. So that's what we're going to focus today, is sustainability in this passion-driven business, in this vision, where in this business that you are creating because you love what you do. So here's some of the things that I'm going to go over, some of the things that we'll do today. You'll examine the relationship between, as I just said, being a mission-driven business that charges for your services. We'll unpack and reframe common money stories, especially around pricing for yoga teachers, and we could expand that to other wellness professionals. You'll learn a simple formula for a price that you can share with clarity and confidence. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, but it is simple. And we'll also evaluate some different models for making services both sustainable and accessible. So things like sliding scale, scholarships, ideas like that. Okay. So before we jump into all of that, why are money skills so important for yoga teachers and for, well, gosh, maybe this is backing up too far, but let's get on the same page. What are we actually trying to do with money? Well, money provides security, freedom, and options. We have more options for how to spend our time, for who we want to work with, for even for our lifestyle and how we want to take care of ourselves and nurture ourselves and do self-care when we have enough money. When we have a healthy relationship with money, we can make better choices around it. And for me, better choices means choices that are in alignment with your values. So that's really the theme that we're going to keep coming back to today. And what I really hope for you, what I really want, is that you waste less energy, less time and energy worrying and second guessing about money, and develop a relationship to money that is positive and kind of neutral in a way, because hopefully I'll have a chance to talk about this more later, but my experience with money is if we can move it out of the realm of emotions and into the realm of information, then things start to clarify really quickly. And ultimately, the goal is to help people. That's why you are in a mission-driven business. It's why you became a yoga teacher or a massage therapist or whatever type of wellness practitioner that you are. If you really just wanted to make money, if money was your main goal, then you would probably have gotten into real estate or banking or something like that. So money can help you help more people. And so that's the context for today. Briefly, my story. I have been a yoga teacher since 2004. And like many other yoga teachers, I did not think about the financial aspect at all when I first started teaching. I just wanted to teach. I just wanted to share my practice. And truth be told, my example from my parents was very much like this. It was kind of money's over here. We don't really talk about it. We don't really think about it too much. And there's never enough, by the way. So my parents both really pursued their passions. My mom was an acupuncturist. My dad is still a college professor of Japanese history. And neither of them modeled sound financial decision-making or taught me anything about money at all. To be honest, I won't bore you with the details, but they made a series of really poor financial decisions throughout my childhood and my life. And so I just didn't really have any tools when it came to thinking about money and to having a positive relationship with money. So I had a turning point in my life when my mom died. She passed away in 2012, and she died with $400 in her bank account. So she was, pretty much destitute at the time of her death. And yes, there was, to some degree, it limited her options for medical care, for example. But I remember, because my sister and I, were taking care of all the details afterwards. And so we had to close her bank accounts. And I remember looking at that bank balance and being like, oh my God, this is not right. Like, how could, and I apologize, this is like, I don't want to be self-indulgent, but this is like an emotional piece of my story, that how can a person's life boil down to $400? Like, this is a person who helped so many people, who had these passionate, loyal clients who credited her with changing their life and their health. And she just didn't have a skillful or balanced relationship with money. And so this was a point for me where I was like, I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to let this experience, I'm not going to follow the same pattern, let's just say. And I'm going to use this tragedy in my life as a wake-up call. And so I started to engage in the world of business and of learning about money. And I started to get curious about it. And what I figured out was that money is neutral. Money is inherently neutral. And I can extrapolate, I can guess why my mom and my parents avoided all thought and talk about money for most of my childhood, but I don't know for sure. What I know for myself is, I think, and for a lot of the people that I've worked with, is that we've created stories about money, about some type of inherent quality that money might have, like whether it is positive or negative, and for a lot of us, it's like, it's not good, that money is not such a great thing, that it causes people to behave unethically. And by facing my own stories about money and my own assumptions about money, I had to realize, I kind of had to come to the realization, you know what? Money's a tool, and it is what I make of it. So I'm going to talk about that more later in a way that I hope is a bit more coherent. But that's my inspiration. That's why I'm here sharing with you. I also host the Yoga Teacher Resource Podcast, some online courses, a membership for yoga teachers called the Impact Club. And I am constantly working with yoga teachers to help them connect with the gift of numbers and the gift of looking at numbers as a friend. And so that's what I'm going to share with you today. So the stories that we have running in our minds influence our behavior. And some of those stories are conscious, meaning that we would say, I believe this, I believe that, and some are operating behind the scenes. So I've come to believe that our stories and beliefs about money have an oversized impact on our ability to, on the way that we move through the world. Our stories and beliefs about money are interconnected, deeply intertwined with our need for survival or our urges for survival. So this means that they're happening in the center of the brain. And I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but if you can, I'm circling around the very middle of the brain here. And this is the limbic system. So the limbic system is in the center of the brain, and it is where your emotions happen. And it is also where your instincts happen. So let's say if you find yourself doing something habitually or acting without conscious thought, that is initiated by the limbic system. That's happening in the limbic system. And the limbic system is much faster and much more efficient than your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex being this front part here of your brain, the newest part of your brain, and the most resource intensive part of your brain. So it is a little bit clunky compared to the limbic system. I want to give you an example. Let's say you are in a conversation with a loved one and they say something, and all of a sudden you feel like heat rising and this sense of rage or this urge to flee. All of that is the limbic system. And you might even have your prefrontal cortex, you might even have your brain saying something like, no, it's fine, or trying to kind of talk you down, but you can't help it. You can't help the feeling that comes up. So when it comes to our survival, it makes sense that that would be a very, very powerful part of our brain. And money is connected to that because money is what allows us to have security, what allows us to have a roof over our heads, what allows us to even walk through the world and make a difference. So we're not very logical when it comes to money. The best way to befriend money, the best way to shift some of these stories and patterns is to bring those unconscious stories to the surface so that they can be examined, questioned, and if you find that they're not helpful, they can be reframed. So I want to do a brief check-in here. How is this resonating for you? Have you heard all this before? Do you already know that you have stories about money that are keeping you stuck? If so, tell me what they are in the chat. That would be really helpful for me. If this is brand new to you, if you're like, whoa, I've never heard it described this way, tell me that so that I have this sense that we're still, even though I'm the only one on screen, I'd like to have a bit of a back and forth conversation so that I'm really customizing this presentation to you who are here with me live today. And as I'm waiting for responses, which I will keep an eye on, I want to talk about the most damaging money story, which I did allude to a bit earlier, is that money is inherently dirty or corrupting or problematic in some way. Bernadette says asking for money is greedy. Right, exactly. So this is kind of the core money story, right? There are other money stories for sure. There are subtypes of money stories, but when it comes to really freezing, when it comes to money or not taking action or second guessing everything, this is the core. The reframe, the new story that we need to tell ourselves and over time start to believe is that money is a tool. Money is a tool for us to get our needs met and for us to express our values. So that theme of values comes back again. Needs met, that's one side of things, express our values. Now that is something that I think has been, I don't think I ever thought of that before I started consciously seeking out education and guidance about money and about business in general, is that I can actually express my values through the way I spend my money. And in fact, I already do, whether I know it or not. So I think most of us know that we get our needs met through money, but very few of us consciously choose to express our values through our money. Now, here's where this gets a little bit sticky. Many of us have seen other folks use money in ways we don't resonate with. And then we blame the money instead of saying, okay, either this person doesn't share my values, or they are disconnected from their values. So some examples of this would be power, control, material goods, external beauty, comfort, pleasure. Not that there's anything inherently wrong. There's ways to, comfort, pleasure. I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with having that as a value, but it may not be your value. You may have different values. Sonia says, money is a tool. I think I can feel confident asking for a certain amount, provided I know or have a good idea of that type of organization or group usually get charged or can pay. So it's about norms for you. And I think we'll get into that a bit more later. I think some of the material I have planned for a bit later will speak to that a bit. Back to values, your values, my values, and how we can use money to express them. Here are some ways, some values that I use money to express: fairness, health, connection, excitement, sustainability, compassion. So for example, I choose to spend money on local food that might be more expensive and is sustainably grown. That is a way I express my values, through money. I choose to support businesses that have fair hiring practices and fair employment and labor practices. That is a way that I use my money to express my values. I choose to offer my membership, for example, at a sliding scale rate. That is a way that I use money, even though I'm not spending money here, I'm receiving money, but the structures that I've set up for receiving my money express my values. So within the context of yoga, and again, some of you may not be yoga teachers, but it still might be helpful to hear what the yoga tradition specifically says about money. Not that they're speaking to money directly, but indirectly, this framework of the Purusharthas is very related to money. Within the framework, there are four main aims of life. So these are the four things that yoga practitioners are invited and directed and guided to focus on achieving in their life. Artha is the means or the resources. Dharma is purpose or alignment, specifically the alignment with the natural laws of the universe. That's a direct definition, but the way that it often gets interpreted is the way that you live out your purpose, the way that you move towards the highest version of yourself. Kama is pleasure, and moksha is liberation and an understanding or the ability to see beyond this limited physical world. So those are the four aims of life, according to the yoga tradition. And they're all honored. They're all understood to be necessary. So this is not a tradition that says forego all pleasure, that somehow you achieve liberation through removing pleasure from your life. There are subsets of the yoga tradition that invite adherents to renounce all their material goods, but that's just very small subsets. In general, you need means, you need resources in order to live your purpose, in order to experience the joy of life that will motivate you and keep you present and keep you in a state of balance, let's say. And there are also stages of life. So there are stages of life, according to this framework, where it makes sense to really focus on the means. There are stages where it makes sense to really focus on living out your purpose. And specifically, it's the end stages of life where you're invited to focus primarily on this liberation or this recognizing of yourself as something bigger than your physical body, and identifying with that more and more. So money is the means through which we can live a life of purpose and seek liberation and pleasure. Money is a form of means, right? If you have property, that would be means. If you have social connections, that would be means. If you have, let's say, debts of some kind, like people owe you something, you have done labor for them and they owe you. These are all different types of means, but money is the most flexible of the means, right? If we think about all the different types of means that we could have, money is the one that we can apply in almost any situation, not every, but almost. So we all do have these stories and beliefs about money. Some are neutral, some are useful, and others are totally getting in your way. I don't think that there's probably anybody, any human on the planet that doesn't have each of these, right? Stories that are neutral, stories that are useful, and stories that are getting in your way. So let's talk about, what do we do? How do we identify money stories that might be problematic for us? And then how do we transform them? This is a very brief overview. So if this is a big issue for you, if you think that this is one of your core wounds, for example, then you might want to find a therapist or a coach who specializes in this to help guide you. But you can definitely do a lot of work on your own. I would say I haven't had anybody specifically coaching me on money mindset. I have done a lot of reading. I have done a lot of my own work on this. So this is going to be sort of ball in your court about how deep to take this. Step one is to pay attention. So notice, for example, how your values do or don't show up in your spending and or your charging. In order to do this, I highly recommend that you start tracking your spending. And you can do this, you can track your spending, your personal spending, through an app such as Mint or YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget. And from a business perspective, I highly recommend that you use some kind of accounting software, such as FreshBooks, QuickBooks, Xero, or Wave are the four that I have some limited experience with. I'm sure there are more. So you want to track your spending and pay attention. So have a regular ritual where you look at where your money went and you check in with, does that connect? Does that feel in alignment with your values? I think that's a really important piece, right? It's not just tracking. It's not just gathering data, but it's actually evaluating, is this in alignment with my values? And you will start making different decisions. If you have a regular appointment with yourself where you're asking this question, you're going to start having little hits of intuition before you pull your credit card out about, yes, this is, or no, this is not in alignment with my values. And then you can also journal, especially if you want to go through a period of time where you're focused on this more deeply in your own self-inquiry work. Journal about like how you spent your money in the past week. What stories are you noticing? What stories are coming up for you? The beginning of this, so tracking your money, spending time journaling, is designed to help you pay more attention to your thinking. And this is a big part of what we're doing in yoga, right? We're not just, a big piece of the yoga framework is don't believe your thoughts, notice them, and then question them and evaluate them. Use discernment. And then you can start to change them if they need changing. So the idea for a more formal practice is that it draws your attention and helps you stay connected to this as a point of focus in this world that is trying to draw your focus away all the time. So you notice your thoughts when it comes time to ask or spend for money. Ask for or spend money. And then pay special attention when you feel fear, anxiety, judgment, or disgust. So what you're doing is you're training yourself to have little awareness lights come on whenever money comes up, and to just pay attention. And so you're paying attention to stories, and that's useful. But the stories that are going to be most useful are the ones that come up at the same time as you start to feel fear, anxiety, judgment, or disgust, or any other uncomfortable feeling. Our uncomfortable feelings are flags. Here is something to pay attention to. Then you can question your assumptions. And if you are not able to do this thought work on your own, then you might, as I said before, work with a therapist, a counselor, or a coach. So let's check in with some of the most common money stories when it comes to pricing for yoga teachers, for passion-centered businesses of all kinds. I've got 4 main stories I'm going to share with you. And as I share them, you can tell me if you've ever had this story or not. I'm going to share why this story is kind of problematic and how you might reframe the story for yourself. I want to be really clear that the reason these stories are powerful is that there's some truth to them. So it is not that you have mistaken thinking and there's something wrong with the way that your thoughts are running through your head. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that your reaction to the thoughts may not be useful, and you can edit your thoughts in a way to make them more useful. So here's a story that I hear a lot. People don't really value yoga or massage or Ayurveda or actually, if anybody here is not a yoga teacher, will you tell me in the chat so I can use your actual example as I go through this? Thank you. And I see that there's some questions that have come through, but I'm really wanting to get through all of my content. So I'm going to come back to the questions at the end. People don't really value what I do, so I can't charge too much or else they will stop coming. So why is this a problematic thought? Well, it makes some assumptions about your students that puts your students out of alignment with your values because you value what you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. So if you are putting yourself subconsciously at odds with your students, it's going to affect the way that you show up. It's going to affect the confidence with which you say your prices. It's going to affect the way you invite people to join your classes or your programs. It is going to drain the power from your presence. So here's a reframe for this story. I'm going to charge a rate that is sustainable for me, and I'm going to focus my attention on the students who do see the value of what I offer. I'm going to focus on the students who do see the value of what I offer. Okay, I would love to hear if you can feel as you see this shift in story, how different this is energetically, how these stories are not diametrically opposed, right? That second story acknowledges that some people may not value yoga, but it is empowering. And so we want to change our stories from our money stories, the ones that are disempowering us, draining our energy and preventing us from taking action. We want to change those into stories that empower us. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 is supply is way more than demand. How do I justify my prices? Again, This story looks at something that you don't have control over, i.e. supply, and ignores what you do have control over, which is differentiation. So here's a reframe. There are very few people teaching yoga out. No, there are lots of people teaching yoga out there, but very few who, for example, very few who understand the needs and desires of a Muslim woman, or whatever your niche is. So you want to focus on what makes you different instead of the demand. Because when you're looking at just general demand, yeah, there's a lot, but there's only one you. And if you can learn how to articulate what makes you different, then again, it's just going to change the way you show up. You're going to show up excited. You're going to show up confident that you can offer something and share something that nobody else can do. Story number 3. I don't have the right credentials to charge that much. So again, there's assumptions being made here about your potential students. The assumption is that they care about credentials more than other things, which may or may not be true, and frankly is unlikely to be true. I've talked to a lot of yoga students, and I've never honestly had any of them care about credentials. What do they care about? Well, they care about you. They care about the way you show up. They care about, do they trust you? Do they feel you understand them? You get them? Can they relate to you? So here's a reframe. I'm going to create an offering or a type of class or a presence that meets the needs of my students, or the people that I want to work with, so specifically that they will not care about credentials. One more reframe here. I think this is close to a story that I saw in the chat a little earlier. It's selfish to charge a premium price for something that should be freely available and accessible to all. And this is very specifically around yoga, because there's so many yoga teachers who have the story, yoga should be free. Well, it is. Yoga is free. Any one of us is free to get on our mat. I've got my mat behind me, by the way. I leave it rolled out because I freely get on my mat every morning and guide myself through a practice. And if I want to be guided through a practice, there are millions of free videos online. I can go find one. It's free. So some people, however, can and will choose to pay more for a specific type of guidance and support. Yoga is free, but your time and energy is not free. Your education, your training is not free. Your needs to buy yourself food and to live in a house is not free. Here's the reframe. This is the price I need to charge for my services in order to sustain, and I have other structures and services in place to fulfill my value of accessibility. So what I mean by this is, if you wish, you can have scholarships. If you wish, you can have sliding scale. If you wish, you can do a certain number of karma spots. That's fine. But you need to build that into the overall picture of how you're going to get your needs met as a human being who deserves to be alive and deserves to have as much comfort and as much security as any other human being. Myth. So I'm moving away from the stories for a moment here and into this one myth that drives me crazy, because when I get into this world of money mindset and charging and pricing and business, this is a story that I hear a lot, this myth that I charge a lot, charge your worth, this charge your worth myth. And if you're coming to this conversation from the perspective of a yoga practitioner, a yoga teacher, then I don't know how you could possibly charge your worth, because every human being has the same inherent worth. So every human can't and shouldn't charge the same. So we can't charge our worth. That's a rubbish piece of advice. Your worth is not connected to how much you make or how much you charge at all. What you're offering, frankly, is priceless. What you're offering is deep transformation, healing, connection, and a return to the potential for thriving that humans crave, that we all are seeking, or maybe not all of us, but many of us are seeking, and many of us are seeking when we come to yoga. So what you offer is priceless, and it's not really connected to what you charge. What you charge is connected to your needs, two things, your needs and the circumstances and abilities of your students. That is what determines what you charge, but it has nothing to do with your worth. So let's talk about this formula for fair pricing. There's two components, super simple, not easy. You're looking for a price, whatever you're offering, you're looking for a price where you feel your students are getting an incredible deal. Your clients are getting an incredible deal. So you feel like, wow, I'm offering at least as much, if not way, way more than they're paying for, okay? Your students are getting a great deal. You also feel that you are being paid fairly. So these are the two components of fair pricing. Now, I want to point out here that both of these components are based on you. Isn't that interesting? So I did say earlier that it's your pricing is somewhat based on the capacity of your students or clients, and that is true. But when it comes to the fair pricing formula, when it comes to figuring out what you need to charge, you don't want to be overthinking and trying to mind read what your students want or need or can pay or are willing to pay, because you're going to find that out just by putting your prices out there. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay. No matter what you charge, some people are going to think you're too expensive and some people are going to think you're too cheap to be good. So you cannot please everyone. You cannot please everyone. If you try to please everyone, you're going to drive yourself absolutely insane. You're going to, second guess every decision. You're going to feel stuck. You're going to drag your feet. You're going to hem and haw. You can't please everyone. So you have to please yourself in these two ways. You feel like it's a good deal for them. You feel like it's fair for you. How your clients feel about the cost, not really important. I mean, it's important, but it's not your business. That's their business. Everyone else, every person who you say, hey, do you want to work together, is free to say no to your prices. The only person who is not free to say no once you've put a price out there is you. So let's say you, actually, I'm going to talk about a really common scenario that happened in the beginning of the pandemic, is that a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm going to put my classes online. I'm going to charge $3 a class. And so the first part of that formula is there, right? They feel their students are getting an incredible deal. Well, over time, they see how much work it is. They keep showing up, and they're like, whoa, that second part of the formula is not there. This is not fair to me. This is not sustainable for me. You're the only person who has committed to showing up for your prices. Now, can you raise your prices? Of course, totally, you can. And your students can still walk away. But once you've quoted a price to a person, let's say you've been invited to teach at a conference, and you kind of freak out and you say, I'll do it for $50. And then you start thinking, oh my gosh, I have 2 hours driving each way and I have to bring my own props, but you've already made that quote, right? That is why you are the person who needs to be comfortable with your pricing. And you'll learn over time by putting your prices out there. If they're too high, then maybe you need to back them down. But you're gonna learn that so much faster by finding prices that feel fair to you, putting them out there, and showing up with this confidence that whatever it is you're charging, your services are worth way more than that. It's a super, super awesome deal for the people that receive your services. So the other thing that happens is the more confident you feel about your prices, the more people are going to agree with you. And this is not some kind of like airy-fairy, wishy-washy, wishful thinking. This is just the way you show up. I want you to imagine, I'm sure we've all had this experience. I'm going to actually use the example of a babysitter. I once tried to hire a babysitter and I was like, how much is it? And they were like, well, I don't know. What do you think? And my first thought was, ooh, are you really responsible enough to watch my kid? And of course they were, right? I know it's a separate skill set, but that was where my brain went. We want to work with people who are competent. Part of competence is this sense of being able to communicate the value of what you're offering, this ability to communicate a connection to it's a connection. I guess it's just a connection to the value. I mean, don't want to repeat myself too many times, but if you know and you embody the value of your offering, then people are going to agree with you. I mean, this is, I'm laughing here because this is what's taken to an extreme with people with a lot of charisma, right? The people who you look at and you're like, what they're doing isn't that great. How are people like flocking to them in droves, but they're so confident. So a lot of us who are mission driven, passion driven, we need to take a little piece of that, not go too far in that direction, but we need to take a little piece of that to help our students feel comfortable and excited to get started working with us. So I also want to mention this, charging your students is not what we would call a zero-sum game. So a lot of times this story about selfishness comes up and we think, the more I charge my students, the less they have. And that is not necessarily true. As humans, we've already talked about, we have weird ways that our thoughts influence our behavior. And one of the ways that happens is that when we pay more for something, we start to pay attention, we show up, and we often get more out of it. Now, I'm not saying like charge more all the time and everybody will get more value out of it. I'm saying question your assumption that charging your students is a zero-sum game, that they do not get any benefit from paying for something. I'll give you an example. A YouTube video that is free is very easy to walk away from versus even just a drop-in class that you paid $10 or $15 or $20 for, you're more likely to finish it. All right, I'm running low on time here, friends. I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to try and get through this. Minimum hourly rate. I think it's really helpful, especially when you're first getting started, building your confidence with what you charge, to calculate the minimum that you are going to work for a single hour of work. It's not necessarily what you're going to ask for on a regular basis. For example, your base rate for privates, I recommend it's higher than your minimum. You can always go below if you have an opportunity that offers other kinds of compensation. And let's say you want to do sliding scale, then this rate would basically be the bottom of your sliding scale. If you want a bit more help on this, you can go to teachingyoga.net/pricing guide. Camille, I don't know if you're able to maybe put that link into the chat for people to be able to follow directly, but it's a quiz to help you have a starting point for figuring out your minimum hourly rate. So here's an example of a way that you could figure out your minimum hourly rate. You think about, okay, I need to bring in at least $50,000 a year with my teaching. For some of you, that might seem really high, for others really low. It's just an example with easy math. Okay, you can divide that by 50. Again, just to make the math easy, maybe you want to take more than 2 weeks of vacation, maybe you want to take no vacation, but keeping the math easy, we're going to divide it by 50 to 1,000 a week. We know in this example that we can sustain about 15 hours a week of actually teaching, and that makes the minimum hourly rate $66 an hour. Just an example. And I know we could talk a lot more about this and there may be questions about it, so feel free to put them in the chat and I will get to them at the end if I can. Accessible pricing. So accessible pricing is really about If you have the value of being able to serve people of different socioeconomic statuses, here are some thoughts and some considerations to help you create structures for pricing that will be sustainable for you and also that can reach people who may not have the same financial resources as others. It's helpful to separate out one-to-one services versus one-to-many services like group classes and workshops and anything where you're working with multiple people at once is a different calculation than when you're working one-to-one. One-to-one is very difficult to make financially accessible, but you can sometimes get paid through grants or nonprofit organizations. You can also have a sliding scale, and if you have thoughtfully put your minimum hourly rate at the bottom of the scale, then even your sliding scale should be sustainable for you. And you can also offer a limited number of free spots, but something to take into consideration is the plan to evaluate applicants when demand exceeds capacity. So if you have 2 free spots a month or a week or whatever it is, and you have 5 people applying, don't discount the amount of work it's going to take to sort through them. In general, I recommend focusing your accessible pricing structures on one-to-many offers. This is because it is much easier to make that sustainable. You can still get paid through grants or nonprofits. You can do sliding scale where full pay participants subsidize the lower end of the scale. You can do scholarships, and you can also do pay what you can and or donation based. So the question I want to leave you with is, how does your pricing reflect your values? And you can talk about your current pricing. You can talk about what you plan or intend to do after watching this presentation. How does your pricing reflect your values? And if you've never thought about this before, it's totally fine. You can jot this down and journal about it tomorrow morning or after we finish for today. I had a little bit more about setting financial goals, but I don't think that we have time for that. So I want to skip forward. I'm going to skip forward. And I will just touch on the key points here that I covered today. It's really important to identify and work on any money stories, any beliefs or thoughts that are keeping you stuck. So first you'll have to identify, like, what do you believe about money and where is this bringing up feelings or where is this influencing your behavior? Set up systems for tracking your finances and check those systems regularly because that will hold you accountable, especially if you connect your behavior around money to your values explicitly. And one of the I'm not doing the entire piece on the goal setting, but the piece that I want you to walk away with is don't set your financial goals too big where it's overwhelming and you don't know where to start. Gather your data by doing your financial tracking and then identify what the one next step is or the next phase for you and set small goals frequently that build on each other instead. So a couple of resources for you, that pricing quiz. And I also have a business startup checklist that will go into a bit more detail. And it's basically breaks down the foundations of what you need to start a business, a sustainable business that is financially literate, into categories and action steps so that you can just check them off. And if you have an existing business, then it might help you see where there's some gaps in your foundation. So teachingyoga.net/checklist is where you would sign up for that. It will also put you on a list to receive a 5-day email sequence with some tips for, it's not specifically financial literacy, it's more business building tips, but very much in alignment with everything that I've taught today. So I know we're right at 3, but we did start a few minutes late, so I will happily take some questions now. Okay. Is that cool, Camille? Okay.
Yes, yes, I can definitely stay on for about 5 more minutes. And folks, if you have to leave right at 3, know that we'll send out a recording tomorrow. So rest assured in that. Take it away, Mado.
Great. So Sonia's asking how to charge in the following situations: seniors who live in a community residence, residents of a luxury apartment building, charging nonprofit organizations for staff, charging at hospitals and their doctors, teaching at religious organizations. Okay. So I think we want to separate out, are you charging individuals or are you charging the organizations? If you're charging the organizations, then I recommend looking at your minimum hourly rate and then really kind of coming up with your desired hourly rate in addition to that. So your minimum hourly rate is like, this is the least I'll take. The desired hourly rate is, but I'd really like to make, and then quote that desired rate to the organizations, knowing that you have room to negotiate down to the minimum. And when it comes to charging the actual people, I recommend figuring out a way to simplify so that you're not like putting yourself in a position of gathering $10 at a time every class, but rather charging them for a series and do the same thing, you know, like decide what your minimum number of people is. And so if you get the minimum number of people, you're making at least your minimum hourly rate. And if you get more than that, then you are, that's bonus. I hope that's helpful. All right. Do you have any recommended books for money mindset? You know, Natalie, I don't, but I'd be glad to not off the top of my head, but I'd be glad to kind of see if I can find that and send some to Camille. Okay. And then Sonia was asking hotels and retreats, but I'm gonna put the ball back in your court. I don't think that the actual type of organization matters. Organizations are generally going to want to just pay you a set rate. And so start high, start with what you want to make, because you never know. You never know that for them, that might be nothing. That might be just a dime in their budget. And then know what your walkaway point is, which would be your minimum hourly rate. Okay.
Mado, you wanted me to remind you about the teaching family and friends question.
Oh, yes.
If you want to touch on that real briefly.
Great. So I think we have, oops, sorry, my earbud fell out. We have two main scenarios here, right? We have teaching family and friends for the first time. And then we have teaching family and friends. I've been teaching them for free. And now I realize that that's not sustainable and I want to start charging them. So teaching family and friends for the first time, here's how I recommend going about it. You start with something like, my normal hourly rate is X. Since you're my friend, I am happy to offer you X discount. And if you would like to pay anywhere in between that discount and my full rate, I welcome that. Thank you so much. I would be so appreciative of your support. So you can provide them with a discount, but also some of them are going to want to pay you full price, and you want them to know what that is. You might also say, since you're my friend, I would be happy to give you one session for free, and after that, I would need to charge you my full rate. So mostly what I want to say about that is set your expectations clearly ahead in advance from the get-go whenever possible. It's much more challenging if later on you want to change it, to change what you initially set up. The way that I would approach that is similar. I would say, so we've been working together for a while. I really enjoy it. And it's so special to me since we are siblings, or you're my aunt, or whatever the relationship is. And I'm fortunately getting so busy that I really need to change the format for how we're working together. I need to bring you more into my normal system so that it's not extra work for me. So here's what I usually charge. And then same thing. If you want to offer them a discount, here's the discount I'm able to offer you. I would welcome you to pay anything between that and my full rate. That's how I'd go about it. And always when you are stating your rates, it's important to feel that the other person has the freedom to say no. Because when we come back to that idea of like, I want to guess, or I want to please everyone, I want to guess what they think about my rates, it's actually a form of control. We want to control what they think of us. We want to control their behavior. And if we just come back to, I'm going to control what I can control, and I'm going to let go. This is like from the yoga tradition, abhyasa vairagya. Abhyasa being, you're going to do your part, you're going to do your work. And vairagya is you're going to let go of the results. You're going to allow them to be on their own journey, on their own path. So that's what I recommend. I hope that was helpful. Thank you also very much for showing up. Thank you, Camille and Offering Tree, for hosting this. And if you are interested in more guidance and more of this type of information from me, check out the podcast, teachingyoga.net/podcast.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye. Okay, I booted out all of our attendees.
What was that? You booted?
I booted everybody out. Yep. You can kind of remove them. And I will stop the recording.
Yeah, I was.